When Sa'iyda and I started talking, I thought that the conversation would go a bunch of different places, but instead, we focused a lot on how her family was created and how it has evolved. Because that's the thing. When we have our children, however we have our children, our life is in one place. However, things come up, relationships change, dynamics shift, and sometimes we move. And all of these factors affect our parenting dynamics. And really, that's the root of the conversation today. You don't want to miss a second. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am excited to introduce you to Sa'iyda Shabazz, who is here from the West Coast. And as we're recording, her city is in flames around her, not too close. She's safe. We're recording where she's safe, but it's a time of a lot of upside down and flips in this world where I think a lot of us are feeling that this month anyway, even before the dynamics of a fire came to be. So I'm sure this conversation is going to take a lot of different paths over the course of the next little bit. But first, welcome, Sa'iyda. I'm so happy to have you here. Please tell everyone who you are and what you do and about your family, the things.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to have this chat. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I'm Sa'iyda Shabazz. I'm a writer who lives in Los Angeles, California, with my wife and son and five unruly animals. We have one, we say puppy, but he's actually three. Dog, but he's a puppy in our eyes because he's kind of the baby. Two cantankerous 10-year-old cats and two guinea pigs who are largely the responsibility of my 11-year-old. But I step in and do the things. I always like jokingly say they're my grand piggies.
There you go. There you go.
But it's a lot. I write a lot about things like socioeconomic status, parenting, poverty, gender, race, pop culture, sometimes how all of those things intersect, and sometimes how those things impact how one impacts the other, especially things like social justice and gender and race and socioeconomics and the intersections of parenting. Since I became a parent, that's been, I was a single mom for a while. So that was a big part of kind of what was happening in my life. And so I had a lot of strong opinions about it. And I got to write about it for some really great places like Scary Mommy, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and some other places. And now I do freelancing for a queer website called Autostraddle. We love it. It's focused mainly on queer women, but then, of course, always the intersections of things like gender, gender expression, gender identity, et cetera, et cetera. And therein also pop culture, books, movies, TV. I do a lot of like reviews and stuff like that. And I also write a pop culture newsletter that I release through Substack that focuses on late 90s and 2000s pop culture. That's when I was a teenager and kind of was coming up in the world. And so I have a lot of strong opinions. I think that's where we peaked as a people. And so it's really fun to go back and kind of re-examine some of those things again through the lenses of like what I understand now, looking back on the world. I do talk about also like current events wherein pop culture and things like parenting intersect.
Right.
Because I write so much about parenting for money, I don't really like writing about it for free unless something really like piques my interest.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm chronically online, as I always like to say. So I spend a lot of time on social media, which To my betterment or detriment, that is debatable.
Mhm. Depends
But
on the
it
day.
creates, yeah, it depends on the hour, but it creates a lot of really interesting thoughts and conversations that,
Sure.
you know, pique my interest and like cause me to have opinions that I could potentially get paid for.
There you go. There you go. And today's conversation, you and I talked about this before we started recording, is going to deviate a little bit. Often I'm talking to people about how their families were created. And
Hmm.
we'll just say right off the start that your family was created, your pregnancy and birth and your transition to becoming a parent was created in a more traditional heteronormative type of way. And that's not really
Correct.
going to be the focus of our conversation today. I am deeply interested in talking about a transition of how you parent and how your family has evolved. That's one
Okay.
piece. But I'm
Yeah.
also very interested in talking about these intersections you've spoken of with regard to poverty, with regard to finances and class, and family creation within the queer community. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, one of the things that everybody knows in the queer community is that babies don't come for free. It
They do
is
not.
that it's elitist and expensive, and
Hmm.
so I'd love to hear your take on it. So there's lots to dive into. You
Yes, I'm
tell me where you
excited.
want to start.
Well, we can start with how my family dynamic has
Perfect.
come to be and has shifted over the years. Yeah, I have known that I was queer since I was relatively young. I was about 12 or 13.
Hmm.
I saw Angelina Jolie in the movie Gia, and it changed my entire like life trajectory.
Yes.
I think a lot of queer women my age would say the same.
Hmm.
Watching it late at night when my parents were asleep and was like, what is this? I'd never seen, growing up I was born in 1986. So growing up in the early 90s, mid 90s, early 2000s, queerness was really different. It wasn't as normalized culturally as it is
Hmm.
now. I
Hmm.
think that it's kind of like people who were younger forget that those of
Yeah.
us who are a little bit older than them have had a very different like life trajectory and experiences.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I knew that gay queer people existed. My mom's best friend is a stone butch lesbian. So I've known her my entire life. Like one of my mom's really good friends was a gay man. I understood that these were things that existed,
Hmm.
but I also understood that I did not fit into those boxes.
Right.
I did find men attractive. I was like, oh, boys are cute. I
Hmm.
did, I since I was about 3 years old, I've been obsessed with boy bands. So starting with New Kids on the Block, going all the way to One Direction, like I'm not that into K-pop, but like any boy band that has crossed the American soil between 1989 and now, there's a good chance that I know who they are and I love them
Right.
in some capacity or another. So, excuse me, that was so fundamental to like me as a young person, a young adult, that I couldn't understand how I could also like girls and
Hmm.
also want to kiss them and see their naked bodies. And it was something I sat with by myself for a really long time,
Hmm.
just because I didn't know how to talk about it. I couldn't say the words out loud. I like boys and I think I also like girls.
Hmm.
It was too confusing and weird, and I had never heard anybody talk about it. Bisexual wasn't even a word that like crossed into my like lexicon until I was probably in high school.
Yeah.
And so it was something I kind of like just sat on for a while. And then when I was about 17, I kissed my first girl and I was like, holy cow, this is amazing.
Hmm.
Um, but the reaction I got from my friends forced me back into the closet for a really long time.
Oh.
And I was, headfirst into compulsive heterosexuality for many years, dated men all through college. I think a year post grad when I moved back home as a result of the 2008 recession, which I graduated right into.
Oh.
Yeah, millennials, especially those of us born in like the mid to late 80s who were coming out of college in the early to mid aughts, we've had a really like crappy hand.
Yeah, yeah. It's you've been hit over and over again.
I've been dealing with unprecedented events since I was 15 years old and lived through 9/11. So at this
Yep.
point, it's just like, what's next? But I met this guy at work and he was really cute and we hit it off and we dated for several years. We moved across the country together because I'm originally from New York City and I got pregnant by accident. And that happens when you
Yeah.
have typical heterosexual sex. You can get
Right.
pregnant by accident.
Hmm.
We weren't in the best financial situation, but we were 27. And so I felt like, okay, this is a hump we can get past.
Right.
And I'm ready to have a child. Like I've known since I was a little kid that being a mother, being a wife were things that I wanted out of life. The person that I'm married to might have changed form a little bit, but
Right.
as a kid, you don't even think same-sex marriage wasn't even legal until I was 18 years old. And even then it was sporadic.
Mhm.
Um, I think, gosh, federal marriage equality happened. I was already almost 30 and had a child with a man. So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. So, it was like, oh, wow. Okay, now this is a possibility in a way
Mhm.
that it hadn't been before. But even at that time, I was still very deeply in the closet.
Mhm.
Um, After my son's dad and I broke up, I was too focused on raising a child alone. With very little money, we lived with my parents because I couldn't support a child and live independently in any major city. But like, it's hard and people don't want to talk about this, but the reality is like, no one wants to hire a new mom or a woman with a small child at home.
Mhm.
And they won't tell you it, they won't say that directly. But, I was in an interview once, my son was about 4 months old, and the person asking, and it was just for a receptionist job. And the person doing the interviewing asked me, if your kid gets sick and you have to work, what are you going to do? And so I was like, well, we live with my parents, like, barring any need for hospitalization, like, I'd leave him with them and I'd come into work. But when that question comes up, you already know they're not going to ask you for a second interview, or they're not going to hire you because they already see you as unreliable.
Is that something they're allowed to ask? Like,
I
when
don't
I
think
hear they're
so.
allowed to, but I don't know when that changed
But
either.
yeah, it's also really, I think it also kind of depends. And they can ask you those questions if it's a single, like, I don't think like a major company can ask those kinds of questions, but
Right.
like, this is a hair salon in New York. So, like,
Right.
they don't have the same labor laws and like that kind of thing, too. Plus, this
Hmm.
was 11 years ago. So I think things
Sure.
might have changed since then. But I think it also depends on the size and scope of the company, that what they
Right.
can get away with, because they're not going to say, excuse me, they're not going to say that's not why they're hiring you. Like,
Right.
that they
Right.
definitely can't do. But they
Right.
can, covertly find ways to like make it clear that that's not the goal for them. So I really had to spend a lot of time figuring out what was going to be the best way to like take care of my family. And so
Sure.
I worked for many years as a babysitter, and then I started freelance writing, and that turned out to be the ticket for me to like gain independence, I guess, if you will. I was able to save enough money to not only move out of my parents' home, but to move back to LA where my son's father was living so that they could have a relationship, because he was 3.5 at that point. And, little boys, like, if they have a dad in their life that's not a bad person, they should be able to have a relationship with them.
Hmm.
And financially, flying back and forth is just, it's too expensive.
Yep.
So I made that decision. Cost of living in LA was a little bit less than it was in New York at the time. Like, housing now is kind of, I think, equaled out, but in
Hmm.
LA you can often get more for the same amount that you're spending as opposed to in New York.
Hmm.
So it just felt like the right decision for me. I was like, I need to be on my own. I need, you know, to put the things in at home in New York at a distance for my own like mental health.
Yep.
And we came here and it was great. We were fine. I was building up a career. I was really like stepping into my own. And people kept asking, like, my friends were like, why don't you date? Like, what's going on? Why are you like alone? And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm perfectly content with myself. I was raised as an only child,
Mhm.
so I'm used to hanging out with me, myself, and I. But I realized fairly quickly that I wasn't the problem, it was men. I had just been like, I don't want to date men. I find them
Right.
insufferable. I don't want to do this. I'm not attracted to like, the last man that I found attractive, or the only man I found attractive at that time, was Harry Styles. So like I couldn't see a guy walk down the street and be like, "Oh, he's cute." I'm just like, "Ugh, why are you?" And so I started to kind of like, those inklings had been there before. I remember watching the show Orange is the New Black and being kind of like, there's so many beautiful women on this show. They're
Mhm.
having lesbian sex on television. What is happening? And kind of covertly watching that stuff, um, being not always alone, but trying to kind of curb those impulses, or like masking the way I would sit or watch or observe or like have conversations about that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And so I realized, oh, maybe what it is that I'm no longer attracted to men. I'm attracted to women, and I should try actually dating them for the first time in my life and see what happens.
Right.
And so, after a few years of dating, which is an exhausting process when you're in your early 30s and have a small child
I,
at
I
home
can't imagine. Honestly,
in a
can't
major
imagine.
city. And the other thing, too, is like being in a major city, especially LA, there are a lot of people to date, but not a lot of queer women around my age want kids or want to
Right.
date somebody who has kids. So that was a unique kind of situation.
Right.
I think that's also kind of true regardless of gender, but I think with men they're more expecting a single woman at this age to possibly have a kid,
Right.
whereas like, queer women, it's a different story. And then I had to explain the like, he has a dad. Yes, I used to I identify as bisexual. No, I am no longer attracted to men. All of these kind of things would
Right.
come up, and it was like an exhausting process. Like I was definitely like, I just want to be done with this already
Yeah. Yeah.
and find, my person. Like I know she has to be out there somewhere. And right in February of 2020, so nearly 5 years ago, that person appeared, and it was amazing. And we were supposed to be casual because she was coming out of a long-term relationship and a divorce. And I was like, I have a kid and things are, complicated. And
Hmm.
that makes things harder. But we very quickly realized that like maybe we were each other's person. And she got along so incredibly well with my son right off the bat. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe we
Hmm.
should see where this goes. And then 3-ish weeks after we made things official, the world shut down.
I was going to say, and it seems to me that that's right about the time where you were going to be told, if you're going to see each other, you're going to have to do it living together.
Yeah. So we were, we did a pretty good job at like keeping a bubble. So we'd basically just either be at her place or mine. I had a dog at the time, a different dog at the time. So, and she had the cats, but cats you can leave alone easier than you can leave dogs alone.
Hmm.
So she would be the one who kind of divided her time between her place and mine. And we realized that like it wasn't really cost effective. We had talked about moving in together much later, maybe even that same year, but much further down the line. But she worked in the entertainment industry at the time. And as a result, that shut down as well.
Of
And
course, yeah.
so she didn't have income coming in. And I was like, okay, well, if you're struggling to pay your rent, you should just move in here. Like we were talking about it, it was going to happen anyway. I lived in a studio. It was a tight squeeze.
Boy.
we were but we were gonna make it work. When I had a fairly decent income stream from my freelance work, but we weren't quite ready to like upgrade to a bigger space. But I was like, we can make this work. We did, and we did for gosh, a year, a little over a year. We made it work in a very small space.
Mm.
Um, Within the first 9 months that we were together, we both proposed to each other. Um,
Oh,
mhm. We got engaged on Christmas of 2020. And so we knew. And we're not young. So it didn't feel like we had to like pretend or like walk around any of that kind of stuff. And it was, it made sense. It was easy. When I got promoted to a better position, we were able to move into a bigger space. So now we live in a very nice 2-bedroom apartment in the same
Nice.
neighborhood. We just moved down the street. People always find that really funny. We literally just moved down the block. It made things a lot easier.
It's going to be easier for school and everything else too for your
Yeah, we didn't.
child.
Yeah, we that was my biggest thing is I didn't want to leave the neighborhood. He loved his school. Um, Even when he did half of it virtually because he was only in kindergarten when everything shut down.
Mm.
So he did half of kindergarten, all of first grade, virtually, and then kind of went back in person in second grade. But we love the community, even though we are very much the minorities at his school, but we don't mind. Everyone there is so great and he loves it. And yeah, we like our neighborhood. I don't drive, so it's a walkable area, which is important to me. One day we might ever. My wife keeps inkling that like and hinting that she wants to move to a different neighborhood, and she's like, "But you'd have to learn how to drive." And I'm like, "So we can just stay where we are, thank you." Um,
And is that a New Yorker thing? Like you just because I know a lot of New Yorkers don't ever bother getting their licenses. What's the
Yeah,
point?
it's a part of it's 90% that and like 10% that I have really severe anxiety around being driving a car. Um and I don't think that like therapy or medication would fix that. Like it's
Nope.
just how like when you have recurring nightmares there's like themes. Mine is driving a car or
Driving.
being forced to drive a car. So I'm like
Yep.
I think
Fair.
my brain is telling me that maybe we shouldn't try this. I've attempted
Yeah.
it. It's not fun. No thanks. Don't want to do it. And so yeah, we live here in LA and we have things are great. We got married in February of last year, 4 years to the day of our first date.
Nice. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so yeah, we're coming up on 1 year of marriage and 5 years together, which is really great. And it's been a weirdly easy transition. Um, like I said, my wife and my son get along really, really well. He accepted her immediately as a third parental figure because his dad is still in the picture. Even though my wife and I are the primary caregivers and, his primary parents. She's the one now listed on all the school forms and I mean, also she works there. So sometimes
Right.
she gets information before I do now. It's an interesting kind of turn of events. She just started working there this year. So it's really funny to see now that like how our roles have shifted. I'm still like, if we were to ascribe heteronormative titles, she is very much still the dad
Hmm.
because there are things that she's just oblivious to.
Hmm.
And I still do a lot of like the caretaking in our home. Like
Hmm.
I make dinner every night, I do the grocery shopping, I do the laundry, like I pack lunch every morning. And she
Yeah.
can do it if I am not here. Like I have left and felt confident that the house
Right.
wasn't like burned down or anything. But my son is also very particular and he wants me to do everything. And I'd be like,
Sure.
sometimes I'm like, there's another adult sitting literally right next to me, right?
Yeah.
He's like, Mom. I'm like, okay, cool. He calls her his stepmom like pretty openly. He
Yeah.
very much is like, I have two moms, but I also have a dad, which is really interesting and confusing to people.
Yes.
It's people because like most of the time his dad is he's in the picture but he's very much on the fringes of the picture, so you only really see him at like performances or like important things, so a lot of people kind of don't know if they don't already know,
Right.
and most people know me and then by extension my wife because we kind of now come as a package deal,
Yeah.
but even now there'll be kids or classmates that he has and they'll be like, wait, you have two moms? And he's like, yeah. To him it's completely normal and has never been an issue. it
Right.
was there was no kind of like, how do I explain this to people,
Right.
or you know I feel weird because I'm the only kid at my school with two moms. It was very seamless for him. He was just like, this is a matter of fact, this
Hmm.
is who I am, this is what my life is. If you can't understand it, that's not my problem. It's which is really interesting to see in a small child. Like he was only 6.5 when we got together.
Hmm.
So he had an understanding of the world and how he moves through it, but it was very like he sees things very concretely. And
Right.
so it's very like easy for him during lockdown, the parks were open. And so since my wife was still the one not working, she would take him to the park every day just so that he can like be around other kids and kind of have some of that connection that he wasn't getting at school. But she was the primary one doing that because I was working full time.
Right.
And so it was very interesting. People just naturally accepted her as the parent. There was never any question. And then when I came, oh, because also my son is mixed race. I just realized I forgot to mention that. His dad is white. I am black. My wife is white. My son is very fair skinned. So people
Okay.
don't always realize that he has a black parent.
Right.
Often,
Fair.
if the white parent is in the space with me, everyone defaults to them, even though I'm the
You
one who
carried him
knows
and birthed him.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
even though I carried him and birthed him and like have raised him for 11 years,
Yeah.
people will default to that person. I'm like, you're asking the wrong person questions, but okay, like
Yeah. Let's see how this
I
goes.
guess we're gonna find out because neither like my wife at least is better than my son's father about knowing things about my son. So like she knows all of his medical issues. She
Mm.
knows like what size shoe he wears and his favorite color and like all of those things. But she's still like, I don't know. I didn't give birth to this kid. I met him when he was 6. Like, I don't know what you want from me. So during that time where she was kind of doing things with him, people just thought that that was his mom. They never questioned it. When I would then come around, which was very rare, the kids were like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "That's my mom." And they're like, "No, it's not." And he's like, "Yeah, it is.
Pretty sure
That's
I
very
know.
much the woman who gave birth to me." Like, that's he calls me his first mom or his original mom or his real mom,
Oh,
depending on like where he's at. And so he's like, "No, that's my real mom. The other one is like not actually my mom. She's but like, she is, but she's not biologically related to me." And it was very confusing. I mean, that's been happening his whole life. So for
sure.
me, it's like whatever. But for him, he was just like, I don't understand why you would question
Yeah.
that this is my mom. Like, she
If I
is
tell you it's my
so
mom.
you should believe me. Yeah. So at his school, because I was the parent who did all the pickups and drop offs and was always kind of around, my wife was the one that were like, "Oh, you're his, you belong to him." Okay, that makes sense. But he's very much like, "No, I have 2 moms." And so his school is largely Hispanic, Latino, Mexican. We are the only mixed race family and the only 2 mom family. So we are
Oh.
very visible
Hmm.
in a way that some people might be uncomfortable with. We understand that it just means that we have a certain responsibility
Hmm.
to be visible, and what that means is really like has been really like interesting for the past few years to try to figure out what that looks like, especially now that she's a constant presence in
In
the
the school.
community,
Yeah.
of how like we have to kind of stand in that visibility.
Absolutely. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. You know about babyREADY because you're listening to this podcast, so you know that we are all about queer family planning and helping you have the family of your dreams. But did you know that we don't abandon you once your baby arrives? We actually offer parenting coaching as well, and that's not just for the newborn phase, although we are there for that, but it's through toddlerhood and young children, tweens, and even through the teen years. When you need someone unbiased to lend an ear so that they can hear where your struggles truly are and help you come up with a path and a plan that feels truly right for you and your individual family, don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to be there for you. Visit us at www.babyready.info for more information. I understand and I do respect that there's lots of people who don't want to be the flag bearer of a community
Yeah, for
or of a
sure.
cause. But at the same time, when we stand tall and stand strong and we don't stand down from who we are, and that gives people the opportunity to learn. And in a case like this, to work
Exactly.
through their discomfort from perhaps an arm's length distance where they
Mm-hmm.
just get to become a little more familiar with it every day, every day. I think that there's something actually really wonderful about having that opportunity and
Yeah.
teaching without
Yeah.
instructing.
It's been very interesting. It's just like, by the sheer fact that we're there, we are visible. And I think it comes a little bit more easily to me than it does to my wife because she spent a lot of, her formative years trying to hide who she was,
Hmm.
which is understandable. Again, she's a little bit older than I am, so we have kind of different ways that we like move through the world and kind of understand our queerness and how we sit in that and how we present. She also is more masculine presenting, and so for her sometimes that's enough. She doesn't also like she is like I don't also then need to like wave the flag. It feels kind of,
Hmm.
whereas I'm like, right, I stick out. I'm black. Like there is no way around that. And so and for much of my life, I have been the only or one of a few black girls, women, whatever, moving through the world and moving through space. So I'm used to kind of having to be the poster child for whatever that is.
Hmm.
And it was very easy for me to say, like, okay, like if we're doing this, then that's who we're going to be. And sometimes that education is teaching when you're dealing with elementary school and middle school kids, because he goes
Sure.
through to a K through 8. And so I would go when he was in third grade, which was the first year that we can kind of have parental presence in school. I would go to his class and do presentations. We did one about Black history. I did one about pride. His teacher was really amiable and open to that. And so I was like, can I come in and talk to the kids? Like, I know school's almost over, but can we have that conversation? She's like, absolutely. And I didn't know this was going to happen, but there were parents who were also in the room that day. And I was doing really rudimentary level, like explaining
Sure.
their, third graders. It wasn't going to be
Sure.
anything particularly detailed. But I realized then that I was explaining it also to adults who didn't know, who
Hmm.
had no framework, who didn't really know what the definition of non binary was versus trans,
Yeah.
or that there are all these different ways that queer people identify besides just gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary even. Like there's so many
Hmm.
different things.
Yeah.
And they were just as engaged as the kids were. And that was surprising and really, really nice to be able to like have those people like have adults in the space and they weren't like horrified or like, I don't want my kid to learn this. How dare you? Because you never know
Yes.
what people
No,
are thinking.
that's
And
very
so,
true.
yeah, it was really nice. And I'm actually this week, now that school is kind of back to normal, hopefully, after the fires and holiday break and everything, I'm going to be volunteering with the school's GSA. They're getting it all together. We're still in the
Nice.
planning stages, but it'll be starting in the next couple of weeks. And it was something to me that was really important that we start and have.
Sure.
Pre-COVID, there had been one, but then like with lockdown and just like all the changes, the teacher who was involved was no longer there, and so I was constantly in the principal's ear, like, we need a GSA. There needs to be a
Right.
GSA. When
Yeah.
are like, how can we make that happen?
Hmm.
Because I know that there are kids who need it and who need that space and who see me as like a person who is visible to them and who they understand and they know I have a life. And,
Yeah.
they know that there is a person there who is a mom who is also queer and who cares about them.
Yeah.
And it's so important at that age to kind of nurture that and give them that space to know that, like, if their mom doesn't care, I care.
Right. And
And so
and
that's, yeah.
I feel like now in January 2025, that is going to be
Mm-hmm.
far more necessary than it
Yes.
has ever been
Ever been.
before.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the other thing too, is like we are in a marginalized school community. Like I said, most of the kids at his school are also the same kids who have to worry about if they get to stay here or,
Hmm.
what the next 4 years of their lives are going to look like. And that's traumatizing enough when you're 11 or
Yeah.
12. But then to also have this like
Throw
other very
queer on top of
traumatizing
it.
thing on top of that, and to maybe not have the parental support that you need to like feel like a whole person, it's a lot. And so, however I can show up, like, I make it a point to do so
Yeah.
because I know if I had had, and it's not to say that I didn't have supportive people in my life as a kid, I just didn't know how to have the conversation,
Hmm.
because it was a hard conversation to have at that
Yep.
time.
Yep.
But now they are. far more equipped to have those conversations with adults. And so it feels like incredibly important to me to like be there and show up for them in a way that, they may not have. I think it's, the quote, like, be the good you want to see in the world. I think be the queer adult that you needed when you were a little queer kid.
100%. I think that's an invaluable piece. How does your ex navigate the dynamic of, because there is a stereotype, and I'm going to say
Mhm.
that it's a stereotype that you take a guy who has procreated with somebody, and then that person decides that they're queer, like they haven't always been, and they just were
Right,
closeted for years. Let's just, you know, in any case. So you come out, he finds out you're out, you're not hiding that from him. Like, how
right.
has he navigated that? And how has he navigated that with your son?
Um, it's something that we didn't really talk about. We have like in terms of emotional kind of stuff, we have a very like hands-off approach. When he started dating after we broke up, he didn't tell me. When I started dating, I didn't really like we didn't sit down and have a conversation about it. Um, I think he just happened to drop our son off and like I was coming back from a date with a woman and I was like, "Oh, hey, this is so and so." And he was just like, "Oh, okay." He knew I was queer. So it
Okay.
wasn't like a shock to him. We had talked
Okay.
about it when we were dating very long ago. I had mentioned, oh, I'm bisexual, like
Yeah.
non-practicing, but like it is a thing. Um, and so he wasn't completely shocked. I think he was just more like, oh, okay, you're doing that now. The transition I think has been a little bit easier because I date women. I think he sees it a little less threatening.
Sure.
Heterosexual men are incredibly territorial. So I don't know how things would have worked if I brought another man into the picture, especially since we have a son together.
Sure.
But bringing another woman into this situation, he was like, okay, this isn't something horrible. He was actually very like sweet about it. And was just like, okay, however this works for you. When I introduced him to my now wife, I was like, oh, hey, this is her, and like we're seeing each other. And he's like, okay, cool. And he was in a relationship himself. Like, because of COVID, we didn't really get to do anything together,
Hmm.
which might have happened if things were a little bit different. And then his life circumstances changed and he had to move out of state for a while. But when he came back, he stayed with us for like 6 months. I
Okay.
know people think that's really insane.
Do-
It was,
it is,
but
but it's a level of maturity. And if you can teach your son that the
exactly.
people who are
Love
fundamental
him the
in
most.
his
Yeah.
life
Can
can
tolerate
put
each other.
anything else aside to
Yeah.
make sure that his life is good, then that just encourages him to be the best possible human ever, right?
Yeah. That was very much like I wanted him to understand that just because his dad and I weren't together, that I still like him. We're still okay with each other. Things have happened since then that like there's been some friction, but we're working through it. But he's always respected my wife's role in our son's life
Good.
and appreciates and understands that like she's picked up a lot of his slack, whether intentionally or unintentionally,
Right.
So he would never speak out of turn about her in a place where she, or our son would ever hear about it
Right.
because he's not that stupid.
Fair,
I just
fair.
generally think like he knows because we have a fairly, I guess, like unconventional kind of arrangement. He doesn't pay child support. We don't have like court mandated, interactions or kind of any of that stuff with him and our son. Like we all work really like low wage jobs. So I'm like, I'm not going to try to take the little bit of money that you have. But if they need something and he can help, he will. Like
Right.
we've had that kind of arrangement. And he tries to see him as much as he can, which is usually a couple of times a month, maybe like depending on his schedule. He takes him out to dinner, they go have lunch, they go hike and play video games and whatever like things that they
Yeah.
want to do. So they still have a relationship, but he understands at the end of the day, like I make the decisions, my wife
Hmm.
makes the support decisions. He doesn't really get a say in how our family moves through the world and how we
Right.
go from day to day to navigate the world because he's in like he's still very much a part of my son's life, but he's a non-entity in terms of like how we exist as a threesome and how, that happens. But he's been really like, in terms of the queer thing, he's been really great about it. Like there's no, or if he's not, I don't know.
He hasn't shown that to you.
More
And that's all you
importantly,
can
he
ask
hasn't
for.
shown it to me, and that's the best part. By extension, his family has been really lovely about it, and I feel like that's also really important to talk about and acknowledge, because our son is the only grandchild on his side of the family, and to a lesser degree on my side, my mom is my dad's fourth wife. My dad has 8 other grandchildren. My mom
Mm.
only has one biologically. So my son and his dad, he's the only grandkid on his dad's side of the family. Neither of his dad's siblings have children. So he gets a lot of attention as a result of that. But my ex's family is so, so lovely. I mean, they've been so wonderful to me since our relationship ended and, have always had my son's best interest at heart. But when I was like, oh, hey, like I'm with this person, like this is the person, they immediately accepted her into the family. And it was very, very sweet. Like my ex's mom sends us gifts and, they went to Europe and she sent us all back a present. And she always asks about my wife and like she'll be like, "Oh, it's her birthday. Tell her I said happy birthday." Or she sends, when she sends money, she still sends me money for Christmas and my birthday, which is like insane. But and it's so sweet. But it's always like, you guys go do something, spend it on you two, you
Right.
know. And it's very like, how are you both doing? How is she doing in that way? And whenever, his siblings, if they come into LA to visit and they see my son, they expect to see the three of us. So
Right.
they're also very like, we're very, are very happy for us in that sense too, which is rare, I think. I don't
Yeah.
know. I've never heard of anybody else having that kind of experience or situation.
No, that is unique. But again, that's your son seeing the way that things should be. I
Right.
mean, when there isn't fully respecting that, when there isn't an issue of abuse or anything else
Right.
nefarious happening behind the scenes, then
Yeah.
that's how it should be.
Yeah. That's how I try to like move through the world and try to make our family dynamic fit. It's
Hmm.
interesting. People are still kind of always a little bit like, huh, how does that work? And I'm like, not always easily,
Yeah.
but you have three adults who are trying to make it work the best they can.
Yeah.
And sometimes things get a little uncomfortable and we
Hmm.
have to work through that. And however that we're going to do that, we do. We deal with the issues as they pop up.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, my son is the most important thing. And we
Hmm.
all want what's best for him. So it's great. To him, he just gets all this extra family. And that
Yeah.
is so cool for him. So, he's got family on my side, he's got family on his dad's side. Now he's got a whole bonus family because my wife's family has, embraced us just as much as my family has embraced her, and my ex's family has embraced us as a family. Hers has as well. So he gets like a whole new set of extended family. He's got cousins his own age. He's got more aunts, and he's got like
Love it.
extended cousins and a great grandmother, and like all of these things that he just has more people to love him. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we want for our kids?
Yeah, 100%. That is exactly what we want for our kids is a safe, healthy, robust, love-filled life.
Yeah.
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 And I had a whole other thing I wanted to talk to you about. And maybe it's a time to bring you back another time, but I don't want
Yeah.
to take up your entire afternoon either because I know time is sacred. You're just getting so your feet
Yeah.
on the ground again after the holiday season. So before I let you go though, would you please tell me what is your very favorite part of parenting your son?
Oh, that's so interesting. Um, he's at such a great age.
Hmm.
We've had a really great string like the last 4-ish years as he transitioned out of, being a little kid into
Hmm.
this like pre-teen kind of age, like I
Yeah.
guess tweens, if you will. It's been so much fun just to like see who he's becoming as a person
Yeah.
and getting to, because I'm very, in terms of certain things, like in that respect, I'm very hands off. I kind of try to let him create his own understanding of the world. I guide him as necessary, but like he's a really good kid, so I don't have to do much, which is really nice. But like seeing the way he perceives the world, the way he receives the world has been so interesting. He's got a really goofy sense of humor, but he's also a Gen Alpha. And like, if you know anything about those kids, they just move differently through the world. Um,
Hmm.
for better or worse, I guess that is yet to be known because the oldest kids in Gen Alpha are just like in middle school.
Hmm.
So we don't really know like who they're going to be and how they're going to like shake things up or not shake things up. But it's really interesting to like sit and talk with him about the world. Like I said, he sees things very concretely. And so sometimes we have to kind of like talk things through. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I see where you're going with this, but like, let's pose this idea or like, let's
Hmm.
try this. His understanding of marginalizations, I think, is probably more advanced or evolved than other kids his age might be because one, he's had to live through his fair share of unprecedented events too.
Sure. Sure.
Um, like kind of like his first awareness was very much 2020
Yeah.
and everything that encompassed, not just COVID and lockdown, but the, Black Lives Matter revolution of the summer of 2020. And we had some really deep conversations about that. And then the insurrection of January 6th, 2021. And they talked about that in school. And like, I've
Yeah.
had, we had to massage through those conversations and then
Sure.
having two moms and everything that's kind of been coming up in 2024 and going into this year, his understanding of the world has been shaped by unfortunate situations, but I think it will make him a better person.
Hmm.
But it's still really interesting to kind of see how little things too affect him or shape him. His latest thing is he's really into 1990s game shows, just like a
Okay.
really random thing.
Hmm.
There's, with streaming and all we have is streaming, so many old things are there as well.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so by accident, he got into the game show Supermarket Sweep. That's like one of his favorites. He loves that one. Um, it's like he loves it. And recently, we've discovered through Amazon Prime that there's like a very specific set of episodes of The Price is Right from 1983. I don't know why 1983, but
Wow.
that's what's there. And so he's also like, was like, oh, what's this? And we're like, oh, it's a game show. Like, it's a thing that as when we were your age, we love staying home from school and watching The Price is Right in the afternoon, in the mornings or whatever. And he's like, oh, can we watch it? And I was like, sure. He loves it. He
Yeah.
absolutely loves it. I came out this morning and that's what he was watching on TV before he had to go to school. He was like, his new thing is a new car. He's very into it. And so he asks really
Awesome.
interesting questions, but it opens up a new set of things to talk about. And
Sure.
so he'll be like, what was life like? I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't even alive yet. I have no idea.
Send him to talk to me. I got some
Yeah.
experience.
And
I was around in 83.
exactly.
I was well
Exactly.
around.
And so yeah, it's really interesting to do that. Or I can say like,
Sure.
oh, well, if you're curious, that could be a conversation you have with your grandparents. They
Sure.
were around. Have, that
Hmm.
opens up your space to do that. And so that's really interesting. But yeah, it said to me yesterday, TV was just better in the 90s, mom. And I was like, listen, kid, everything was better in the 90s. I don't, I'm glad you understand that. I'm really glad that we are on the same page about that. But
Yeah.
he likes, he's like, I think also kids' earliest influences are the things that their parents liked
Sure.
or were raised on. I know, like, when I was a little bit younger than him, like, a lot of my music tastes or TV tastes were influenced by my parents because
Sure.
we were together. So a lot of his, like, touch points are very much the same ones that I had at
Yep.
some point. And so that's also really interesting to see. And he'll be like, oh, I know that from YouTube or TikTok or like whatever. And I'm like, okay, he did something yesterday. He was started singing, oops, I did it again. I was like, how do you know that? He's like, oh, I heard it somewhere. And I'm like, was it here? Was it in this house? Did you hear it in this house? And he's like, I think I saw it on YouTube. Or like, he'll ask, oh, mom, do you know this song? Or do you know this TV show? And I'm like, yeah,
Of
I
course I do.
watched that. During lockdown, his favorite show was the Power Rangers. And I don't know if, for the people who don't know, there are about 30 seasons of the Power Rangers
Are there
and
really?
about 26 different iterations of the Power Rangers. Yeah,
Okay.
it's basically continuously been on TV since the 1990s. By
Hmm.
default, he kind of did really enjoy the original. And so it was really fun to be like, I watched this when I was your age. He's like, wait, what? It's that old? Are you that old? I'm like, no.
Be very careful, child.
But yeah, I'll say I'm old, and then he's like, "You're not old," and I'm like, "Okay, thank you, I appreciate that." Progress. He's like, "No, you're not old. You're great." I'm like, "Oh, I love this." Until then, I
That's
like
right.
audibly creak when I stand up, and he's like, "God, Bob, like, are those your knees?" And I'm like, "Yes, I told you. You'll understand when you're
That's
almost
right.
40
That's
why
right.
things make sounds when you stand. It's coming for you too. So I think that's probably like the best thing about parenting him is just how like seeing how he perceives the world around him and getting
Yeah.
to share that with him. I don't, I think in that sense we're in a very unique kind of space
Yeah.
because of the fact that we have like one foot in the past and one foot in the future.
Hmm.
And we can see, like I'm a part of that first gen of kids who had internet, who were like digital and analog, and now like we're fully digital. But I can
Hmm.
remind him of things of like, this is what life is. Yesterday, when he was watching The Price is Right, for example, one of the prizes was an answering machine. And he was just like, what the heck is this? It's like, well, first of all, phones used to be on the wall and very static. You could not carry your phone in your pocket. And so we were like, and then, like people, you could have this thing. And he was like, wow, what a time. Or we watch old movies. We showed him Honey, I Shrunk the Kids for the first time over the weekend
Oh my
because it's been
gosh.
really fun to share like those kind of things with
Yeah.
him. And he's like, oh my God. Like, again, it blows his tiny mind because it's archaic to us.
Right.
A movie that's almost 30 years or over 30 years old at this point, it feels like yesterday. To
Yeah.
him, it's like a relic of a time that he will never understand and
Yes.
has to try to make sense of. He's like, what do you mean that's a phone? What do you mean like that's how you do this thing?
Yeah.
Wait, you didn't have a computer? You didn't like you couldn't just use an app to do things? You had to call someone to order a pizza? What in the
Yeah.
world are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, things just didn't magically. He hates running errands. And I'm like, you would have hated it even more when you were younger. Like if you
Yeah.
were a kid when we were kids, because
Yeah.
there's so many things now. I can order something and then just walk into the store and walk out with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't a
100%.
luxury or a thing that we even knew. And so it's really beautiful to get to see the world through the eyes of someone who literally is like, I cannot fathom. He can't even fathom a world with no Wi-Fi, let alone a world where the internet didn't exist. Like, he's
Yeah.
like, what kind of primitive lifestyle did you have? What did you do? I'm like, we went outside and we read books and TV still exists. People like, did TV still exist? Did you have color television? I'm like, sir, that hurts. Yes, I'm not your grandparents. Like, calm
That's
down.
right. That's
Like,
right.
no, your grandparents didn't have some of those luxuries, but like I sure did. We had cable, buddy. Like, listen, just because I didn't have Netflix doesn't mean I lived in like the end days. Okay.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Tell everybody how they can find you and your wonderful writing and the work you do.
Okay.
What's your Substack?
My Substack is called This Must Be Pop.
Okay.
So if you look that up, you should be able to find it if you were to search it on Substack.
Yep.
I am to be found on Instagram and Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I will never. I know people are like, how could you? And I'm like, listen, all social media is owned by really bad people.
100%.
I'm not going to keep adapting my life because they want to become increasingly more terrible.
Yes. Fair.
As you know, as young as I am also damn near 40. I'm not learning a new social media thing. I'm not doing it. I won't. I refuse to use TikTok. I won't learn TikTok. No. Blue Sky,
Fair.
no thank you. I'm good. I will, it's also, I think everything is how you use it. So
Sure.
I just, I'm like, whatever, I don't care. Like my longest relationship is with Facebook. I won't get rid of it. I've had it for 20 years. So
Yeah.
I'm in. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a part of
Fair.
like one of the first like several hundred schools to get it. So I've had it for a really long time. So whatever. Screw
Fair.
you, Mark Zuckerberg. I'm not I'm not the bad guy here. You are. I'm not leaving. Um,
Fair.
but you can find me on Instagram and Twitter under the handle XOXSAI, so XOXI.
Hmm.
Um, I am on Blue Sky. You can just search my name, Sa'iyda Shabazz. Um, I have a TikTok, but I only have it so that my friends can send me things. I don't make videos, so don't bother. And I have links to like my work, and I share things on social media the best I can remember to. Um, so you
Fair.
can always that's the best place. That's the best way to possibly find me
Fair.
and get to see pictures of my very cute family because that's mainly what I post. Or if you follow me on Instagram, I love a meme. So I post a lot of really fun memes in my Instagram stories.
That's cool too. I will put your contacts in the show notes so anybody
Awesome.
listening can find Saida that way.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for taking the time to
Thank
chat with me
you.
today. It's been really great, and I mean it when I say I'd like to have you back because I really would like to
Absolutely.
talk more about the intersection of all of the things when it comes to queer
Hmm.
family creation. So
Yeah, I
let's do
mean, I've
that next
done
time.
work and research on that, even though that's not how my family was made. I've have extensively like written and done some research on that stuff. So I'd be happy to come back and kind of talk about some of the more squidgy parts that nobody wants to talk about.
They're important though. They're
Yeah,
necessary. Super. Thank you so
you're
much.
welcome. Thank you.
As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable pasts and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, If you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.